The first thing, yeah, it's gone. Thank you. Yeah, so last time we saw purpose and flow, and this time we will look at time management. All right. Uh, we have reviewed all the concepts which was there in the pre-slides in terms of what is a flexible leader, what is neuroplasticity, what is perspective, what is building a perception around things, and what are automatic negative thoughts, and so on. Just to review what we did in the last session, a very quick 2-minute review of that is a purpose is not the what, it's not the how, it's really the why. Why do I do something? Why do I exist? What is my purpose is really what purpose is all about. Purpose usually should be bigger and beyond us. And it is something which is somewhat outward focused. Like we discussed in the past, for a teacher, it is naturally the purpose of a teacher is outward focused. And therefore, to be a very good teacher or to be able to teach something to a group of people is automatically a purpose in itself because it is outward focused for a teacher. Many other professionals don't have the luxury of having a purpose which is outward focused. For teachers, it's natural. A purpose is also not something which we can say, my purpose for this month is, my purpose for this quarter is. It's not quite like that. Purpose is something which is really the philosophical heartbeat of ourselves. It's in some sense, why do I exist? Kind of a question is the answer to that is really the purpose. Then we talked about a different concept which was developed by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which is called the flow. In flow, we said on one axis, we have our competence. On another axis, we have the level of difficulty. If neither the competence nor the level of difficulty is good enough, then we are in a state which is called apathy. But if our ability or our competence is high, but the level of difficulty, the level of challenge, the level of excitement we are able to get in our job is not good enough, it goes down the boredom and relaxation route. And if our ability is not high enough and the challenge keeps on increasing, then it goes from apathy to worry to anxiety. The other three sectors are really what we want to focus on, which is coming from challenge, where if your ability keeps increasing and the challenge is very high, we get into arousal, or from the ability being high and the challenge slowly increasing, we move to control, and the place where it all connects is the flow. There is one little thing I wanted to mention here, which I forgot to mention in the last session, is having been a leader for quite a few years, what I've noticed is when we want to delegate, when we want to give somebody a certain job, you're more likely to take them into flow through a bit of anxiety and arousal into flow rather than from relaxation to control into flow. Okay, so give them a task which is a little more than what they are capable of. Have the safety net and cover them in case they fail. You have to cover them. You have to have their back. And then slowly, if you're able to push their ability forward, then you will get them into flow. Is a better way to get into flow than through the control route. I mean, we can say we can hit flow from two axes, but a better way to hit it is through giving people a little more than what they are capable of. People get quite excited about it. Give them a little more rather than getting it perfectly right and then slowly increasing the level of difficulty. It doesn't work all that well. Flow is a genuinely satisfying experience with a deep involvement. It's highly focused and time really suspends. That's why it's called a flow. It feels like it's just flowing out of us. We have no sense of time, no sense of saying that this is what I'm doing and so on. It just flows. That is what flow is all about. Yes, Jarna, you raised your hand.
Ramesh, so will you be good enough just to focus a little more onto that delegation point and with a concrete example, if it is possible? Sorry, otherwise.
Sure. No, we can. We can. Yeah, we are going to talk about delegation as we go forward, Jarna, today. Uh, but what I meant was when we have people who are reporting into us, there is always one type of conflict, which is if a person is good enough for X, do I make them get extremely good at that particular X before I make that 120% of the X? Okay, that is a, or do I give them something which is, which I know as a leader they are not capable of at this point in time, but I'm loading them with something which is a bit more than what they are capable of, and then they will become capable over a period of time. Till that point in time I have to handhold them, because otherwise if they fall down at that point in time it will be a nasty fall, and I don't want that to happen, because they are my team member, they are my people who are reporting into me. I don't want that to happen. But to create the excitement, I give them a task which is a little more than what they're capable of. Okay, it's a bit like saying, while the, don't take this parallel to or the analogy too literally, but it's a bit like saying that if a child is good in a certain subject and the child is in 7th grade, now give them a challenge which is a 9th grade challenge, not to show and prove to them that, see, you can't do it, but to create that level of excitement in them. And they will go through a bit of anxiety, but from anxiety, as they build their competence, as they stretch themselves, they'll quickly move into arousal, into flow, rather than give them an easy task and an easy problem, which will keep them in relaxation, and then move it into something where it becomes so good, which is control, and then into flow. It doesn't somehow seem to happen. It's much easier to hit flow from something unrealistic than from going from a place of control. That's the simple point I was making on flow journal. Then we integrated the two in terms of the purpose, in terms of the flow, and we said, what is that I love to do? What is that I'm good at? What does the world need? And what is the one which will pay, where we said paying is not so much in terms of just rupees and paise, it is also tangible and intangible. Yeah. And the place where it all meets is called the ikigai. And given that purpose is a little bit more long term, and flow is also something where we are good at, and our ability and our core ability, ikigai is something which will stay for a reasonably long period of time. So it's not like there is an ikigai for today and an ikigai for tomorrow. Ikigai is a bit more long term sort of a thing, where you will be in ikigai for a fairly long period of time. Now, these are the things we have done in terms of leadership, the neuroscience concept we have discussed in terms of neuroplasticity, belief systems, values, beliefs, morals, ethics, and attitude. Then about perception and how to overcome perception is in terms of mindfulness, and also the Wayne Dyer statement in terms of change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change, automatic negative thoughts, many types of it, and finding purpose and flow. So today what we will do is time management, and more generally management skills, but specifically time management. Now, when we talk about time management, there are any number of books on time management. You will find a large amount of literature on time management, one of the most talked about subjects. Most of those books, most of those papers or articles which are written are primarily focused on a few things. One, it will try and tell us how to get more done in less time. Okay, that's one thing they will all focus on. How do I get more done with less time? The second it will talk about is saying, how do I organize myself? How do I plan my day? How do I plan my week? How do I plan anything? So there are any number of tools in terms of how do I plan, how do I organize, the whole business of organizers and various different types of calendars. And you can see if you go and try and buy a diary, there'll be like 20 different diaries, each one of them giving you a different way of managing your time. Then there are books which will talk about make a list and don't remember a list, always write down something. Then there is Brian Tracy's favorite ABCDE method, where he talks about A task, B task, C task, and then the delegatable and the eliminatable task. All of those things are time management tools. But if you see at the core of many of these books and articles is really about tips and tricks. How do I organize myself? It doesn't ask a slightly larger question. Okay, these are very important. Don't get me wrong. These tips and tricks are very important. Getting ourselves organized, getting our thoughts regulated, making a list, and doing this ABCD, all of that is very important. But even more important is something which is at a slightly higher level on time management. And that is going to be the focus, because the rest of the time management, we can take it from some book or the other. Okay, so we're going to make a case and an argument. Time management is much more than just organizing, planning, making a list, and getting more done out of less time. It is something much more than that. If it is much more than that, what is it? I'm going to show a number. Okay, you can put it in the chat box. What do you think this number might be? Okay, let me put the one below. What do you think this number is? 100,000. Let me see if I can see the chat box. Okay. Estimate of what, Shubha? Yeah, it is the product, Vidya. So 70 minus 22 into 260 into 8, which is approximately 100,000. Yeah, it's not quite 100,000. 100,000 is a nice round number. Okay, the outcome of a problem. Okay, the 100,000, okay, which is 70. I'm taking 70 as roughly our retirement age. 22 is the age when we come into work. 260 days is on an average how many days we work in a year. 52 Sundays, and then a few national holidays, a few half days on Saturdays, and so on. 260 is a good number. And then 8 hours a day. Okay. Some of us might say 9 or 10 or whatever it is. That's roughly what this number is, 100,000. That's the number of hours we work in our entire life. Professionally, not personally, professionally, the number of hours which we work in our entire life is approximately 100,000 hours. Now, 100,000 hours can either be a very small number or a really large number, depending on how we choose to use it. And that choice is ours. 100,000 hours is all that we have. Every one of us sitting on this call or anybody else, we have 100,000 hours. It's a small number, or it's a very large number to achieve a lot of things. Just to put it in perspective, Malcolm Gladwell, when he talks about where can you become an expert in any particular subject, he talks about the magic number 10,000 hours. Okay, in 100,000 hours, therefore, we can potentially become an expert in 10 different things. That's a lot. Okay, that's how large that number is. But it's also a very small number if we are not very clear in terms of what we want to do with the 100,000 hours. Before we know it, it will pass. So when it comes to the environment, right, we all talk about zero waste. There are certain concepts in zero waste which is spoken about in very many different places, particularly nowadays when we have waste segregation and waste management and so on, where we talk about refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. Now, we're going to make an argument in a case saying the only true non-renewable asset which we have is our time. Our time is non-renewable. Our money is renewable. Some of our relationships are renewable. A lot of things in life are renewable. There is only one thing which is definitely non-renewable, and that's our time. So if we elevate ourselves to a philosophical position and say, I have 100,000 hours where I'm going to work in this life. Some of it I've already spent. Much of it I'm going to spend. And what do I want to do with the 100,000 hours? You see, so we are looking at it not in terms of how do I organize myself. We are questioning at a higher level and saying, what will I do with my 100,000 hours? What is that I want to focus on? In that focus, we want to be focusing and going towards saying, I don't want it to be wasted. And I'm not for one moment talking about spending time with your colleague, or sharing a coffee, sharing a laugh as waste. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about us becoming extremely serious and unnecessarily over focused and all those kinds of things. It's about keeping that level of flow, the level of energy towards our work so that we are able to utilize the 100,000 hours, still be doing it very, very joyfully. So the three elements are refuse, reduce, and reuse or recycle. Right? What do we mean by refuse? Refuse simply means I refuse to do something. That's it. A refusal does not mean avoidance. I'm not trying to run away from a problem. I am choosing consciously, in a self aware manner, to refuse to do something. And that is refuse. It's a conscious choice of choosing not to do something. I can do something about it. I can make a certain change to something which is going on there, but I refuse to do that. It's a conscious choice. And as we train ourselves to understand what is that we will not do, then we simultaneously and automatically start getting a very good idea in terms of what is that we will do. If we train ourselves on the refusal part of it very well, we will automatically do what is that we will automatically know what is that we want to do. And that is what refuse is. I'm going to take one step back and connect it to an earlier concept we talked about. In automatic negative thoughts, we talked about blaming and defending. If you recall, blaming is where we are looking for reasons outside of us for our problems. We are looking at our spouse, at the society, at our school management, at our family, and at availability or the lack of it, of money, our children, any number of things. We will look for various reasons, okay, why we are not having things the way we would like to have it. And that is blaming. Our inability to look at ourselves and say, I'm squarely responsible for whatever is happening to me. And that inability is blaming. And then we move to the next step, which is defending, where we are not able to take ownership of the 100,000 hours which we have. My 100,000 hours is getting wasted because of this person, because of that, or this society, or my spouse, or my mother-in-law, or my father-in-law, whatever it is, my mother, father, who are children, whatever it is. And I defend that by saying, you know what, I really can't do it with all the work pressure and everything else. I can't do that. And we kind of are not able to take full charge of our own life. The antidote for blaming and defending is really accountability. What is accountability? Accountability is taking responsibility for our life, taking responsibility for every single action of ours. Not saying this is not working, that is not working, this one trip, what can I do? There was traffic and therefore I was late. No, I take accountability for every one of those things. What can I do about the traffic? You can't do much about the traffic, but you could have planned better. What can I do about an internet tripping or dropping? You can't do much about it. You can create a backup. So if you think carefully, we will realize there is a way to solve all those things if you're able to visualize what are the things which can go wrong. So taking responsibility for our action, taking responsibility for our 100,000 hours, taking responsibility for our life is accountability. And that's an antidote for blaming and defending. And accountability, by the way, is at the core of time management. Time management is about accountability. It is taking charge and becoming responsible for those 100,000 hours. If we are making those right choices for the 100,000 hours, time management from there onwards is automatic. From there, it's really about tips and tricks. And therefore, the first thing, my request for every one of us is to be telling ourselves, okay, that we have to make a sankalpa which says that I will not say that I don't have time for doing something. I have a choice of choosing to do something or not choosing to do something. That choice is there. I can refuse it. But once we have taken it, there is no such thing called I didn't have time. I didn't have time, or I do not have time, or I don't have time is really a defense. And here we are defending or blaming an abstract. We are not defending, we are not blaming something, a person, in which case that person can defend and talk back. We are blaming or defending an abstract of saying, I simply don't have time. And it can't even talk back to us. The time can't talk back to us, and therefore we actually start imagining and thinking we don't have time. But we all know, we just saw, each one of us have only 100,000 hours, and that's it. That's equal for all of us. It's the most equitable distribution of any resource in the world, which is the time. All of us have pretty much the same amount of time, which is 100,000 hours in our work life. So the question we should be asking ourselves is not so much whether I have time or don't have time. The question really is, what do I do with my time? The question therefore really is, what is that I will not do with my time? What do I do with my time? What is that I will not do with my time is really the key question we have to ask ourselves. This is one of my favorite lines of Mahatma Gandhi. There are many favorite lines of Mahatma Gandhi I have. One of my most favorite is this, where he says, your action expresses your priorities. I don't have time. Try and replace that sentence in your head at least with, that is not my priority. Then it will turn the whole thing and put the accountability onto us. I don't have time seems like somebody else is not giving me the time. If I say that it is not my priority, then that means I am choosing not to do that. If I want to exercise or work out for 45 minutes a day, and I say I simply don't have the time to work out for 45 minutes, just replace that statement with saying working out is not my priority. It will have a profound change in the way you look at things. Just change that. Whenever you feel like saying, I don't have time to do something, you tell that it is not my priority to do that particular action. Okay? It will automatically sort out our priorities once we are able to do that. Why? Because we turn the statement from an external looking statement to an inward looking statement and said, it is not my priority to do something. So can you attend this particular wedding? No, I'm sorry, I won't be able to attend it. Okay, why? It is not my priority to attend it. You don't have to tell the other person exactly in so many words, but if it's not your priority, don't do it. So therefore, ask yourself the question, is this my priority? And is this priority aligned to some of the things we talked about earlier, which is in terms of my purpose and my goals and where I might find my flow and everything else? There is no point in knowing what our purpose and what our flow and all of that jazz and ikigai and everything else if we don't direct our energy along that route. If we don't direct our energy on that particular path, what good is having a goal or having a purpose or any of those things? I mean, it's no good having any of those things. And therefore, we have to constantly ask ourselves the question, no, it's very important to know what my purpose is, but it's also very important to ask my question, is this my priority? And is it aligned to my goal? Is it aligned to my purpose? Is it aligned to the place where I will find flow and joy? Is it aligned to all of those things? And if it is not, then refuse it. Don't go down that path. There are plenty of things which we can refuse, starting with a simple thing. When there is a conversation going on in some hot topic on WhatsApp, we feel like replying back and forth and get agitated and everything else. Have you seen these WhatsApp conversations where it takes us? We simply go back with our original views we came in with. The other person goes back with the original views they came in with, only more agitated, both sides. It's a waste of time. If it's a waste of time and that's not aligned to my purpose, then it should not be my priority. If it is not my priority, then I don't want to be engaging in that particular activity at all. Now, what do I do with that particular time? That's a good question. Don't fill it with some random activity. Let it be free. Release time in such a way that you found free time. Once you have found free time, then you know, now I'm accountable and answerable for it. It's easy for us to say that I don't have time. The moment we release time, the moment we create a space, then we turn the accountability onto ourselves, which is why I said time management is at the core. Sorry, accountability is at the core of time management, because now I have free time. I've released that time. Once I've released the time, I don't want to fill it up in some random activity. I want to be accountable for that time. And now what do I do with that time? That's a good question. We should be asking that. In one of the earlier sessions, we talked about saying that we have two things, the serenity prayer session, where there are things which we want to accept or we don't want to do that. We accept in the sense as it is, or we don't want to act on it. And then there is the other side where we want to act on it. Here, make the choice. Don't act on things which are low priority. The other confusion a lot of us go through is we try to get 100% of the things 100% right 100% of the time. That's not perfection. That's wastage. We're just filling up our time with all kinds of nitty-gritties and then wasting time. We are not releasing time. We have to make the choice of saying, I have to create free time. We'll talk about later in terms of why that free time is very important. We have to create free time. That's the task of time management. Time management is not to manage our time. It is to be able to do all the things we want to do, which are aligned to our purpose, and be able to release some time so that we can put it to work on some other type of activity, which we'll talk about later. That's as far as refuse is concerned. Then we come to the second aspect, which is reduce. How do I reduce the time I take to do things? Well, it's easier said than done. Okay. All of us say, how do I reduce the amount of time I take to do something? Okay. And here is where a lot of things, productivity tools and so on, are focused. We will focus on some of those things, but we will focus really on two important things. The first one is what's called the Pareto's principle. And the second one is a small thing called urgent and important. An important thing, but a small concept called urgent and important. Now, Pareto's principle is the 80-20 rule. I'm sure all of us have heard the 80-20 rule. There are plenty of places where you see this in action. 80% of wealth is with 20% of the people usually, and 20% of wealth is with 80% of people. If you look at a disease, 20% of causes lead to 80% of the diseases in terms of fatal diseases. 20% of the diseases will lead to 80% fatality, and a lot of it will lead to a very small number. Okay, it is there in every part of the society. Don't get too stuck on this 80-20. These are just numbers. Very broadly, what it tries to say is in any situation, in any social context, or time management situation, or management situation, leadership situation, there is the 20% very important things, what we are going to call as the vital few. The 20% is called the vital few. The 80% is the trivial many. Okay. Our job for reduction is to be able to know what are the vital few and what are the trivial many. Pareto's principle says that 80% consequences come from 20% of the action. Of all the things we do, only 20% of them are very important action leading to 80% the consequence. Okay. If we don't know upfront what the 20% is, then we don't have a choice. Then we have to do all the 100% and try and get all the 100% right 100% of the time. We have no choice. But that leads to wastage. So the trick in reduction is really figuring out what is the vital few. What is the 20% which is having the 80% consequence? The rest of it, if possible, eliminate it. If not, you should be able to delegate it to somebody else who is at a slightly lower level of ability or experience, so that for them, it will become a vital few. Now, there is an important point in delegation. As a leader, we're going to talk about delegation, leadership, and structure a lot more in Excel. But here I want to make this just one point, which is delegation is very different from just asking somebody to do something. Of course, it's a very important part of it, asking somebody to do something. But we have to come back and close the loop. We have to have the right kind of system without micromanaging and breathing down the person's neck and disempowering them. We have to have a method and a system by which we are able to still have the accountability. Because remember, for a leader, you are responsible still for the final outcome. So the way to close the loop is by having fail-proof systems. And this does not mean the 20%, which is the important 20%, we'll give it all our 100%, and the 80%, which is the trivial many, we won't quite bother with it. No, somebody else is going to give 100%. So everybody is going to give their fullest. It is just that there are certain tasks which doesn't demand your attention. Definitely, it doesn't demand your action. In which case, you should be able to hand it over to somebody else and be comfortable and confident they will be able to deliver on that. Second point in reduction is this urgent and important. It's become a sort of a default setting for all of us that we are running around all the time with tremendous busyness all around us. Okay, we are constantly running breathless, usually after things that seem to be always urgent. Okay, constantly running breathless behind things which are urgent. This is urgent, that is urgent, this is urgent, all the time, breathless, running from one point to the other. You know what? Important things are rarely urgent. Focus on the important things, because important things have long-term consequences. They need vision. They need planning. They need very high quality execution. Okay, so focusing on the urgent keeps us busy. It's like an automatic thing which is happening. It's a lower center activity, constantly running from one to the other and staying very busy and bustling here and there, and this busyness default setting. But we have to come back and ask the question, then if I'm not even in control of my time, then I'm not being accountable for my time here. I'm not able to release free time. Whereas free time, focusing on the important things and doing it at a gentle pace and doing it in a very precise, planned, thought out manner is a higher center activity. There is quite a bit of literature which argues that excessive busyness is, by the way, not a leadership trait. Okay. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm not going to focus too much on this slide, but very broadly, if you think of it like this, there are people who are extremely busy. Okay. Here it uses the word lazy. Think of it as more like less busy. And smart and not smart, okay, you can use whatever choice of word you like, but the quadrants to focus on is the bottom right. Bottom right is smart people, but who are always busy. It's not a leadership trait. You deploy them in the staff function because they will make sure all detail will be thoughtfully addressed. The other one is busy people who are not so smart, where it says take them out because they tend to keep an organization busy for no particular reason. These are those people who will ask you to sign here and sign there and create all kinds of systems and complexities and put it like this and put it like that and all kinds of time-based stages. Okay. Focusing on the vital few and letting free time to just be there as a free time for you is the lazy smart people, which is promoting to leadership. Then we come to reuse and recycle. Just a few comments here. First, avoid rework. How do we avoid rework? The first thing is we build a perspective around what is that we're going to work on. Okay, we don't think of it as that particular activity, but rather we think of it as saying this particular activity, when is that I'm going to use it again? In which other context am I going to use it again? Who else can use it again? All of those questions. So we build a little bit of a perspective from above and look at it and say, I want to get it right the first time, but you will think of it more in terms of a template. So build it like a scaffolding, build it like a structure so that when it comes to that specific task, you're able to take the scaffolding and the structure and quickly assemble it. So that improves productivity. So if you think in terms of a slightly long-term perspective, and if you're able to think in terms of templates, then we will have those templates ready. And therefore, when we have to do something, we can quickly turn it and make it happen. And that's about the recyclability of our idea. But to think of that particular idea right up front, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but do it right once because it's a one-time investment. Once you've got it right, just repeat it endlessly till it becomes stale. Stale in the sense it is not performing its function. It is not getting stale in your mind, but it's getting stale because it's not performing its function. At that time, you have to change the scaffolding. Otherwise, just keep repeating it. And that repetition or not repeating is not creativity. Repetition, it is productivity. Okay, you can be far more productive through repetition. So the whole trip is how do I create capital? Okay, capital is not money. Capital formation is basically like, for instance, if I have 1,000 rupees, I can either go out, go to a movie and have a meal in a very fancy place and come back in a taxi home. And that's how I spend my 1,000 rupees. Or alternatively, I can take 1,000 rupees and buy a tool of some utility. I can buy a blender or a mixie or something like that. In which case, from the next day onwards, my productivity goes up. So always think in terms of saying that whenever I'm investing my time, I'm investing in capital formation, something I'm investing today, which will increase my productivity in the long run going forward. That's called capital formation in economics. So essentially what we are saying is time management is first about aligning purpose and action. And if your action is not aligned to your purpose, gently refuse it. Second, pursue the vital few, delegate the trivial many, and manage it through the systems because you're still accountable for it, but delegate it. Third, create structure and systems in a way that you're able to keep it as a template. Focus on the important, not the urgent stuff. And get out of this busyness cycle. Busyness is about lack of accountability because if the time gets freed, we don't know what to do with it because we suddenly become accountable for that time. Build productivity tools by all means, create templates. Right? So those are really our 4 important points: aligning purpose and action, pursuing the vital few, focusing on the important and not staying busy all the time, and finally build tools which are productivity tools like a template. Just a few other thoughts. Okay, there are about 3 of these thoughts, and then we will move it into discussion. The first one is a lot of time people think of these things sequentially, where people say, my first, I've just got into my job. I'm going to focus on my work, forget about the family and everything else. After I've settled in my job, whatever that settled means, and then after that, I'm going to focus on my family. And when I'm 50, I'm going to really be going and playing tennis and doing this. When I'm 60, I'm going to be focusing on the society. Research has shown that we have to do all these 4 simultaneously. We have to be focused on our work, we have to be focused on ourselves, we have to be focused on our family and our society and our legacy simultaneously. And time management is about, am I focusing on all those things simultaneously? I have to take care of myself in the present. I have to look at be with my family in the present. I have to deliver the best work output on my work in the present, and everything else is in the present. So I have to do all of these simultaneously. Second, time management is not about how much physical effort have you put in. It's more about mind and energy management. How do you feel at the end of a day? If you feel mentally, you might feel physically exhausted, but have you gone through this feeling? I'm sure all of us have gone through this feeling where we feel physically tired, but mentally we are so happy. We are in a very good place that we made this happen, right? The Indian opener Rohit Sharma just scored 150 runs in today's match. You think he'll be physically tired at the end of the day? Of course, he'll be physically tired. What do you think his mental state would be? His mental state will be thrilled because he has done something for his team. Okay, how do you feel at the end of a day? What is the state of your mind is at the core of time management. Now, what's your frog? It's a trick, it's a tip, but a tip never, and a good tip nevertheless. Mark Twain apparently said at some point in time that if you eat a live frog, if you eat a live frog at the beginning of a day, you can go through the rest of the day with the confidence that all other things will be better than the first task you did. If you eat a live frog first thing in the morning, yeah? And the question is, what's your frog? What is that you've been procrastinating? What is that you've been delaying? What is that you've been saying that, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll, just keep snoozing and snoozing and snoozing and snoozing. What is that? Eat that frog. And finally, there's plenty of research which says doing nothing and having free time is not. So I'm not talking about free time in the sense we go and lie down in the bed. I'm not talking about free time where we just waste it away on some activity. It's about having that space in our mind, having that time in our mind. Okay, that's a very important contributor to our creativity. So if you have to increase our productivity, if we have to be able to visualize tremendous goals, if we have to be a great communicator and a leader, if we have to develop all those empathy and be creative in our job and everything else, it is mandatory that we are able to not be in this busyness default setting, whereas we are in that lazy smart people quadrant, because that is a trait of leadership. Yeah, we will from there move it to our discussions.